Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest on the line, Jamaal Bowman. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How you doing?
How's it going?
How you doing, my brother?
I'm well, sir. How y'all doing?
I'm blessed, black, and highly favored, man.
Pretty good.
Now, tell folks what you hear, today to discuss. I know you running for Congress, but what does that mean?
So, running for Congress right now, we're in the general election, but in my race, particularly in this district, the primary election is the big election. So the primary ended on June 23rd. I challenged Elliot Engel in the primary. He had been in office for 31 years, representing the North Bronx and Lower Westchester County. So think Co-op City, Edenwald, Wakefield, Riverdale, as well as Yonkers, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, all the way up to Rye, all the way over to Hastings on the Hudson. So I challenged him. This is my first time running for office after being an educator for 20 years. We turned out the vote. We tripled voter turnout from 2018, and we ended up winning that election by 16 points, which was huge in a district like this. Right now, for the general election, I don't have a Republican challenger, and there's a conservative challenger on the line. We will not mention their name, but it seems like we should be a shoo-in by Tuesday.
You've done a lot, man. You've been an educator and an advocate for over 20 years in public schools. But what I find very impressive, you actually founded a public middle school in the Bronx called the Cornerstone Academy for Social Action.
Yes, sir. Yeah, after working in education for about 8 years, I started my career as an elementary school teacher in the South Bronx. I did that for about 5 or 6 years before transitioning to high school and working at the High School for Arts and Technology at the MLK campus. I served there as a dean for 3 years. And after doing that work and realizing our schools weren't doing enough to tap into the unlimited full potential of our kids, and working as a dean, part of my job was to monitor the metal detectors as kids walked into school. So every day you got thousands of Black and Latino kids coming into school walking through metal detectors. And if they were late to class, my job was to capture them in the cafeteria. That's what the principal called it, and not let them get to first period. So I felt more like a corrections officer than an educator at that point. So I organized parents, teachers, and students and wrote a proposal for a new middle school, a visionary, social justice, innovative middle school that we would open somewhere in the city. And in 2008, we submitted the proposal, and in 2009, it was approved for us to open in the Northeast Bronx, right around the corner from Boston Secor housing project. And that's where I served for 10 years. Again, as a school of social innovation, teaching, Black and Latinx history and social justice, and teaching about the history of poverty and the projects and entrepreneurship and computer science and everything our schools weren't doing. We were able to do at CASA, and we had some pretty good results. But I also organized outside of the school to push the state to bring in more equitable funding and make sure our schools were culturally responsive, restorative, and trauma-informed as well.
So what are your thoughts on virtual learning then? Because, it's very difficult for kids to stay focused in class. But now when you're home and so many other distractions, whether it's food, your siblings, or TV, or whatever else is there, what are your thoughts on virtual learning?
Yeah, it's tough. We're in a global pandemic, so obviously it's the safest way to approach learning in this moment, but it's not something that needs to become the standard or any way close to the standard, in my opinion. Kids need to be with master teachers in small classes, working collaboratively on projects aligned to what's happening in their communities. But because of the reality we're in a global pandemic, I have both my kids. I have 2 kids that attend schools now. One is 11, one is 6. They're both on fully remote learning because I didn't think the schools were prepared, quite frankly, for our kids to return to in-person learning. And as you know, many families across the city decided to keep their kids home.
I love what you was doing at the Cornerstone Academy for Social Action too, because you said you weren't just focusing on you were focused on educating the whole child, like their physical, their cognitive, their social and creative development. I would assume SEL would have been a part of that too.
SEL is embedded in that, right? So our schools need to not just focus on cognitive development, they need to focus on social and emotional development as well.
Yes.
When a kid finds their passion and something they can tap into, you see their grades across the board grow exponentially. So it's not just about making sure they're good in reading, writing, and mathematics. That's obviously key, but how they feel about being in the school and being in the classroom is also key. Now, when you look at Bloom's taxonomy, which is a taxonomy that the majority of educators sort of follow, at the top of that taxonomy is the concept of creativity. That's the highest form of learning across the board in terms of what educators follow. So for us, we flip the pyramid on its head and we start with creativity. So if our kids can build, design, innovate, and create in alignment with their reading, writing, and math, now they can impact their community in a much different way, from architecture to engineering to computer science to hip hop, which is an incredibly creative industry. That's what we want our kids to do. We want them to create and innovate. And I ran for Congress so that we could bring in the resources into our communities to invest in our kids and invest in the brilliance that's already there. Tap into that and allow us to build our own communities instead of allowing our communities to be gentrified by someone on the outside.
And that's why I love SEL too, man, because it's just like, we don't focus on these kids' mental and emotional well-being. These kids, some of these kids, by the time they get to 6th, 7th, 8th grade, they done been molested, they done been abused, they're dealing with all types of trauma that nobody has helped them unpack.
Go further back than that, right? Forget about 6th, 7th grade. How about 6 or 7 years old, right? And if we don't, that's why another focus of ours is early childhood education from birth to age 8, and particularly from birth to age 3, because that's when the brain is very malleable and adaptable and tender. And if a child goes through trauma, intense trauma from birth to age 3, it literally wires the brain in a way that makes it difficult to learn later on and leads to poor education, economic, and health outcomes. But if we can focus, create nurturing environments for our children from birth to age 3, now they are ready to hit the ground running when they enter kindergarten. So that trauma that you talk about, and you often talk about that, and I appreciate you doing that, it's like the holy grail, right? If we deal with trauma properly with our children, don't pass it down from family to child. But even if that happens, if we have a nurturing environment around that child could then be much more ready to enter our schools and ready to thrive.
Absolutely.
I love what you said about Black Lives Matter too, because you said that a lot of people ask you about it, but or whether you consider yourself part of the movement. You said, as a Black man in America, I am Black Lives Matter. Can you expound on that?
Absolutely. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it's, I'm a Black man in America, number one. Number two, I've been a victim of police brutality. They beat the shit out of me when I was 11 years old and not really doing nothing wrong. So I have that lived experience.
What happened? What was the experience?
I'm chilling with my friends, horse playing in the street like you do when you in 6th grade, making some noise. Someone may have called the police or something, and they approached us, told us to keep it down. I gave them some lip or some back talk. Next thing you know, I'm grabbed up, thrown against the wall, thrown to the ground, face scraped on the ground, nightstick in the back, all of that. They took us to the precinct. And when I told them my age, 11 years old, they didn't believe me. They had my mom bring my birth certificate to prove that I was 11. And then they just let me go without any charges or without anything. And my mother and I didn't even feel like we had the power to take any recourse against the NYPD. It was just like, this is what it is, right?
Right.
Yeah, right. So in addition to that, I'm 44. So I grew up during the AIDS epidemic and the crack cocaine era, right? So that both of those two impacted my family on a personal level and my friends, right? My sister was addicted to crack cocaine, and it really, really impacted my family. Point being, when you Black in America, these are your normal experiences, right? Like these experiences are ubiquitous with being Black in America. So, of course I am Black Lives Matter. Of course I support Black Lives Matter, but that's something when you Black, you don't even have to say because it is what it is. Right. On the flip side of that, you also have to fight to do something about it. Like it's not enough to just say the slogan. You got to be out in these streets. You got to be running for office. You got to be organizing. You got to build not just yourself, but your family and the community in a way that's really empowering, because this is about long-term power, not just for this moment, but for the next 100 years in our country.
That's right. Now, you also said more policing doesn't make people safe. I agree with that too. I think it's very tone deaf when people even talk about putting more money into police, departments, or putting more police on the street. I don't understand it.
I've never felt safe around police. Police have never made me feel safe. You want people to feel safe and secure in their communities, make sure they have food security, right? Make sure we have housing security. Make sure we fully invest in our school. Make sure we have jobs. Make sure we have mental health supports for the people who need it. In other communities, these things are in place. In our communities, we have been strategically oppressed through policies that have come from Washington that continue to keep us oppressed, from housing discrimination to lack of job opportunities. So when our communities needed jobs, historically, what they did was bring in more police. Of course, the crime rate is going to go up when you don't have jobs or opportunities. So you bring in more police, and then you contribute to mass incarceration. So, miss me with that. We need more police, so we need to bring more funding to police forces. We need to bring more funding to housing and education and food and jobs. If we did that, you'll see our communities begin to thrive. But politically, we've never wanted that, which is why we continue to support policies that are oppressive.
Go ahead.
Now, I was going to say, I see that you are a huge Wu-Tang fan, and they say that you got some of your inspiration from Wu-Tang.
Well, not just Wu-Tang, but hip hop overall as a culture. We all about the same age. We all know the impact that hip hop has had on our lives. And for me, I was lucky. I grew up during the golden age. So as a kid growing up, I had KRS-One, Chuck D, X-Clan, Rakim, Big Daddy Kane in my ear. So in terms of knowledge of self, in terms of feeling empowered as a Black man, in terms of identity as a Black man as well. It's something that was very formative for me going through school and then going into higher education and then becoming a teacher. And that's something that I've always flipped and used in my classrooms as well. When we talk about being culturally responsive, hip hop is something as a culture and as a creative art form that I consistently use in our schools. And it's funny, I learned more about my history and culture as a Black man through one KRS-One song, You Must Learn, that I learned throughout my entire K-12 curriculum. Wow. And that's when we talk about being culturally responsive, that's what we're talking about. Respond to what the kids love, but also make sure history and culture is a part of that, and make sure innovation and creativity, as we talked about before, are part of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, hip hop can put a lot of great things in you. It can put a lot of bad things in you too. You know what I mean? That's just the way it is. But what do you think about these hip hop, icons and just Black men in general supporting Donald Trump? What is it about Donald Trump?
It's insanity to me, quite frankly, man. It's really crazy. And, America, this society, this system, it puts us on a pathway and it has us thinking that the number one goal should be financial wealth, right? And that's the thing we constantly talk about. We're constantly looking to build, Jay-Z, Diddy, and others, talk about being a billionaire, et cetera, et cetera. And you all remember back in the 90s, rappers was constantly shouting out Donald Trump as the image of what wealth is all about. But financial wealth is not everything, especially if you're selling your soul to make more money while losing your soul and also destroying your community. So I can't, it's disappointing, it's infuriating, it's frustrating, but I also think we give too much. There are too many accolades we give to celebrities, and we hold their wealth and who they are in such high esteem.
Yes.
We got to remind ourselves that they're just artists, right? And I don't want to be disrespectful. I'm happy that they're a part of the democratic process, and I get it, but we hold the word of artists in such high esteem while not holding the word of scholars and elected officials and many others who have been doing this work day in and day out and grinding in the streets to try to build collective power for our communities. We got to hold them up as well, or even more so than we hold up the word of Lil Wayne and Ice Cube and 50 Cent. Like that's in Lil Flip and Waka Flocka and all them.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I am here for Black people thinking freely about their politics, even if I don't agree with their politics, though. I think that we've been too predictable for too long.
I agree with that. So all things being equal, having a conversation about Republican versus Democrat and where we stand and our Black party and all that, absolutely. But things are not equal right now. We have, in my opinion, a racist fascist in the White House who supports the hysterectomies on immigrants at the border, who has a travel ban on Muslims in African countries, and who is endorsed by police officers who kill Black people. So things are not equal, and we have someone in the White House who has to go, and Republicans who have supported him, in my opinion, have to go. And that's the other thing about this, right? All of this, you know, Ice Cube statements and Lil Wayne statements and 50 Cent statements is coming in the 11th hour. Like we're 2 weeks away from an election, and you saying all this right now. Have you been in the streets, on the ground, building with your community over the last several years to help us build real power and make sure that whoever runs for president, we have a seat at the table? If you haven't been doing that, and now you coming in the 11th hour, you know, I question that, and it creates reasonable doubt of people that we need to vote to make sure going forward we can build power. And I want to say one other thing. Joe Biden is a doorway, not a destination. Mm-hmm. It's about getting him into office and then holding him accountable to meeting the needs of our community. And democracy is a contact sport that you have to engage in each and every day. You don't come in the 11th hour causing disruption and chaos and being egregious, in my opinion, because it creates reasonable doubt and doesn't move us in the direction I think we need to go.
Yeah, and I said that earlier today on the show. I'm just like, I get more mad at us for being distracted than I do at Lil Wayne for who he chooses to endorse. Like, it's 3 days away. Why are we not focused on the goal? Like, who cares if Lil Wayne? Brett Favre endorsed Donald Trump today. Nobody, we don't care about that.
And we can't, and again, we can't come in with 3 days to go or 2 weeks to go. We got to be engaged on a day-to-day basis, and we can't just focus on the president. We got to focus on who's running for Senate, who's running for the House of Representatives, who's running for your city council and your county board, who's running for school board. So all of these issues matter in terms of the things we're fighting for in our community. So we got to be engaged on a day-to-day basis, and we got to organize on a day-to-day basis, and we got to consolidate power. Diddy on his own isn't going to beat white supremacy. Neither is 50, neither is Killer Mike, neither is Lil Wayne. I hope these brothers are working together in collaboration to build real power to really move the agenda, because if we work collaboratively, Joe Biden has to listen to what we have to say.
Yeah, Mike definitely is, always has. Diddy's working with Wes Bellamy and Candace Hollingsworth, Mayor Candace Hollingsworth. Nice. So nice. Yeah, they Mike is definitely an organizer.
Yeah, no, I love Killer Mike, and I see that about him when I'm watching. He's an organizer, and he's all about strategizing, organizing, and mobilizing our community, and he's all about building power from the ground up. So I clearly see that about Mike. So when Ice Cube came out with the contract with Black America, read through it, thought it was really good, shared it with some of my organizers in the movement for Black Lives, like, hey, did you have any conversations with Cube about this? And they hadn't, particularly around the issues of criminal justice reform. So that's what I mean, right? Like, we gotta, to beat white supremacy, which is what I think we are all trying to beat, we gotta all be at the table working together and working it from multiple angles. So, I just want to push brothers to continue to be collaborative.
And how can we push people to support you, man?
Well, listen, like I said, I'm in the 16th district, so North Bronx, Lower Westchester County. So anyone that lives in Yonkers, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, Co-op City, Edenwald, Wakefield, continue to put the word out there, make sure they go out and vote for this general election. We appreciate that. But it's not just about this election, it's about consistent engagement. So we're going to be organizing going forward around affordable housing, development, entrepreneurship, and investment in Black businesses, fully funding our public schools, universal health care, environmental justice, criminal justice reform, immigration reform. So we're going to be continuing to organize. So don't just, we appreciate the vote, and yes, help us to get to Congress, but beyond that, please stay engaged, not just in those communities, but across the country, because this is a moment in our nation's history that we're going to be talking about 100 years from now, right? So let's take advantage of this moment, and let's contribute to the rebirth of America in a way that we all have a seat at the table, and we all have political and economic power, and we mobilize together to use that power effectively.
Absolutely.
What's your website, Jamaal?
Hey, give me the website, bro.
BowmanForCongress.com. BowmanForCongress.com. My social media is at Jamaal Bowman NY.
All right.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you for joining us, brother. Appreciate you for checking in.
Peace and love, y'all. See you soon.